Good Wednesday afternoon. Latest update coming in on Hurricane Lane that continues to be a major threat to the state of Hawaii out in the Pacific. Has been downgraded to a Category 4 after maintaining a Category 5 status late last night in through this morning's hours. It's only dropped the actual wind speeds 5 miles per hour, so not a huge reduction in strength by any means. Overall, the Pacific has few tropical waves out there, but nothing really, looking to develop into the next system. In fact, all the attention is on what Lane is doing, and this is just a beast of a storm. Looks really well represented on satellite imagery. You can see the intense convection, cold top clouds completely surrounding that eye, which is tightly wound, and this thing means business as it's starting to make its turn off to the north and northwest, eventually heading towards the big island of Hawaii. But there is some evidence in there, as you saw from the satellite imagery. In fact, we'll back it up and show you that again, that it looks like some of the most intense convection is being displaced off to the east side of the center there. You can see the white top clouds, the coldest top clouds, the highest thunderstorm clouds are mostly on the eastern side. There could be a little bit of some shear coming in from the west or the southwest, displacing that a little bit. So that could be responsible for the slight weakening and maybe to continue some weakening as we go through the next 12 hours or so. So what overall is wind shear? Well, hurricanes need to develop vertically. They need thunderstorm activity to develop from the base all the way up to the higher levels. And if there's wind blowing across the top, it displaces the thunderstorm activity to either side of that center, eventually weakening the system overall, and it disrupts the overall machine processes that are going on here with the intake at the bottom and the outflow at the top of the storms there. So watching that closely. So it has been downgraded, winds up to 155, so that is high-end Category 4. You need winds in excess of 157, which overnight they were up to 160 miles per hour sustained. So we look at the overall atmosphere that it's sitting in right now. We'll switch up the satellite imagery and show you water vapor, and it's in a very moist atmosphere. It's got the warm sea surface temperatures, minimal wind shear at the present moment, as you saw there, as it was represented earlier on that image. But off to the west here, we do have some southwesterly shear that'll kick up, and that should progressively weaken Lane as it moves farther off to the north over the next 24 to 36 hours, although that's still time that it's going to be sitting over very warm waters and could maintain its Category 4 status at that point. A little close-up image there. You can actually see that displacement of some of that convection off towards the east as well. So hurricane watches and hurricane warnings have been posted for much of the chain state of Hawaii. And this is for imminent threat of 74-mile-per-hour winds or greater in the hurricane-warned areas. Hurricane watches for a little bit later on, 48 hours in advance here for areas north, including Honolulu, later on this week. So time to refresh yourself on what a watch and a warning means. Again, a watch about 48 hours in advance, and we get warnings typically when the threat is imminent, occurring, or highly likely, like we are seeing in the event of Lane, heading towards the big island of Hawaii. So some of the latest updates here from the latest update from the Hurricane Center, or the Central Pacific Hurricane Center out in Honolulu, saying that hurricane force winds are extending out from the center about 32 miles, but tropical storm force winds, which are in excess of 39 miles per hour or greater, 110 miles out from the center. So pretty interesting to see how that wind field may expand as it gains latitude and moves closer towards the big island. The overall eye, very tightly wound, anywhere from 10 to 15 miles wide, so very tiny, and the wind field around it is extremely intense. Recent RECON aircraft flying into the storm, Hurricane Hunter aircraft, found the central pressure now down to 924. Just 24 hours ago, it was in the 960s, so it's been dropping steadily as it intensified, allowing it to reach the Category 5 status overnight. And those winds outside of the eye, so well outside of the 32 miles where the hurricane force winds are, still finding those winds up over 80 miles per hour. So here's the latest track showing it at a Category 4 storm. And as it moves off to the north, I'm going to zoom in here close because notice the latest track does not show it making a direct landfall on any of the islands in Hawaii. That's some good news. But remember how the hurricane force winds extend 30 miles plus out from the center, and hurricane and tropical storm force winds extend out 110. So even if this track does verify, the winds will still be an issue. And of course, the heavy flooding rains and the high surf is going to be a big issue. So you don't need a direct impact. Hawaii's placement out there in the middle of the Pacific, you'd think, they've probably done this before. This is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean where there's hurricanes all the time. Probably gotten hit a few times. No, it's not part of the psyche when you live in Hawaii to combat hurricanes. In fact, the last time a direct hit on one of the islands occurred was back in 1992, and that was Category 4 Iniki. And before that, it was in the 1960s with Hurricane Dot that was a Category 1. Both landfalls were in Kauai. So it's been a long time. They're not used to it there. So 14-day hurricane kits are being advised for all residents in Hawaii. So what's steering lane as we go through the next couple of days? We talked about this a little bit yesterday, how we have dual areas of high pressure, the stronger of the two being on the eastern flank, and that's been responsible for steering lane pretty much due west when it was just south of it. Now it's off to the south and southwest, and it's starting to get pulled northwards because the double-barreled high off to the west there isn't that very strong. It's breaking on down, so that's allowing a little bit of a opportunity for it to move off to the north. Now, there's also something interesting that I read, that the stronger hurricane lane is, the more likely that it'll track farther north faster. The weaker will take it a little bit farther off towards the west there. So it's already over verifying in terms of the strength and what the GFS and the European model have been depicting or prognosing for the past couple of days. They weren't saying it was going to be a Category 5. So this indicates that it may verify a little bit closer to the islands than what will be shown here with what you're going to see on the models. This is the first one, the GFS model, the American model, that shows a close pass-by to the big island of Hawaii and then quickly getting torn apart by topography-induced wind shear here. And then it kind of falls apart to nothing. But if we look farther out into the future here and switch up the models and show you the European, that shows a much closer call. In fact, a much closer call off towards the west, I should say, and away from the big island there. So again, since it is stronger, I wouldn't be surprised if it verifies just a little bit closer to the big island, just scraping the western side of that area and then kind of tracking parallel to the topography of the island chain and possibly impacting areas around Honolulu as we get up until Friday evening or so. So certainly something to continue to watch here. Things will be changing, a very fluid situation in terms of when this actually takes that hard turn off to the north and off to the right, and we'll see exactly what happens as we get closer to that time frame. But right now, hurricane warnings up for that entire area, and hurricane watches the farther north you are. We'll have an update if it warrants tomorrow and beyond.